In this lecture, it's time to add bindings to our actions. At the moment, none of the buttons on our keyboard causes the player to move or attack. The next step is to add a binding to each action. A binding is a specific button pressed on a device to trigger an action. The input system supports the most commonly used devices for playing games. Keyboards, gamepads, and mobile devices are supported with the input system. We can even use pens. Interestingly, we're not limited to a single binding for an action. Multiple bindings can be added to an action from either the same or a completely different device. This practice is common in games. For example, Celeste is a game with 2 buttons for jumping, dashing, and grabbing. While not required, it can be helpful to bind multiple buttons to a single action for flexibility. Let's try binding the actions for our game. We'll start with the gameplay action map. Adding a binding is easy. The move action will be skipped for this demonstration. Unlike the other actions, the move action will require a complex setup. In the future, there will be a lecture dedicated to this action. Therefore, let's start with the interact action. This action will handle initiating a dialogue with an NPC. To the right of the action, press the plus button. Under this button, a drop-down should appear with various options for adding a binding. Let's select the first option. The other options will be discussed in another lecture. This option will allow us to add one binding to the respective action. Under the settings, there's a field called Path. The Path field must be set to the button for activating the action. If we were to view the drop-down, we'd be given a complete list of buttons that are supported. We're not limited to our current device. Various devices from other consoles can be used. Searching through this list can be cumbersome. Luckily, we can press the Listen button to help us find the respective button. After pressing this button, press the E key on your keyboard. Almost immediately, the E key is presented as an option. Let's select it. Great, we've bound the E key to the interact action. If the button does not work, you can manually search for the key with the search feature. I've got an exercise for you. Bind the rest of the actions with keys from your keyboard. For this game, we're going to use the space key for attacking, the Q key for healing, and lastly, the escape key for pausing. Unlike the other keys, you may have trouble with the escape key. I'll let you figure it out yourself. As usual, I'll walk through the solution after you've attempted the exercise. Pause the video and good luck. Hopefully, you were able to bind the keys to their respective action. If not, that's alright. Let's walk through the exercise together. For the attack action, add a new binding. Under the Path field, listen for the space key from the keyboard. Next, let's repeat this process for the heal action. This time, the key we're listening to is the Q key. Lastly, we can do the same for the pause action. Unlike the other actions, binding the escape key is not so easy. By default, if we press the escape key while listening for an input, the Path field will close. Unfortunately, there isn't an easy fix for this. It's the default behavior of Unity. Hopefully, they will fix this problem in a future release. For now, we must manually search for the escape key. In the search bar, search for the escape option. After finding it, select it from the list. Perfect. The actions have been successfully bound. What about the UI action map? In a future section, we're going to work on a UI system. Once we reach this section, we'll start binding keys to this action map. For now, it's fine to leave it empty. As for the move action from the gameplay action map, let's start working on it. After all, that's what this section is all about. In the next lecture, let's get into a discussion on composite bindings.